Pentecostal Quaker, was Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon ended up getting posted. He said, I have to serve. They put him in Iowa. So a sailor in Iowa, what do? He complained enough where they sent him to Guadalcanal. So he ended up being at Henderson Field also, but he was an air traffic control officer. So in a weird way, you know, we're doing some of our presidents that serve because we're probably not going to see much more of that in my lifetime. It's something that used to be pretty typical, that our national leaders often had military service. So. And of course, we've got Omar Bradley with his very distinct look. Being a dental technician, I know he had dental problems by the shape of his mouth. And Sam Houston. And we're going to do him. There's a great photograph or daguerreotype of him with this tie that must be this huge. And that's the way we're going to sculpt him. Now, Nelson, which has been a great seller worldwide since we did it, he's on his 4th rerun in Lincoln and one of our versions of Washington. We have 2 other versions. Oh. This is the figure I did for you guys. And I have to admit, when I looked at the photographs, I could have made him a little wider here. And it's such an unflattering shape, I made him wide, but not that wide. So hopefully his spirit is looking down going, thank you. Then George Armstrong Custer, we actually have a couple more iterations of him coming. I lived in Monroe, Michigan for 9 years, and 4 of those years I lived across the street from the statue. I'd get up every morning, and there he was. I think he's much maligned. He's sort of the scapegoat of the bad policies in the West. He was a pretty good soldier during the American Civil War. He took all the things that he knew into the field with him, and the Confederation of Natives did everything that they normally didn't do. It put him in a real bad place, and we know how that worked out. Grenadier caps, I love these things. I mean, they officially are superseded in 1768 by the regulations for the bearskin cap with a white metal plate. We know that some inspection returns and some regiments are still wearing these things as late as 1773. But it wasn't a quick transition. We do know that the 60th of the foot may have had caps similar to this in blue that they put a bearskin front on. We don't know for sure. It's speculation. But it probably took me as much time to do this small on a shirt pin again, Grenadier's cap, than it does to do a head. And the result is I needed a trophy for this Indian to be holding. And we know what happened to Braddock's soldiers, well-trained European troops in the North American wilderness, delivering great volley fire at an unseen enemy. And that was a disastrous campaign. Now, I only show this picture because there's a funny story associated. So Eric and I are at Don Troiani's in his studio upstairs, and this is before he sold most of his stuff to the U.S. Army. And he's sort of musing, saying, well, you know, I did that 146 New York single figure study, and in retrospect, the blue coat probably should have been a little more punched up. It was a little brighter. And I said, oh, yeah, I agree with you. He goes, well, pull like the 5th drawer, map drawers out, and I pull this map drawer out and goes, oh, like this. It was that. The entire uniform in his map drawer, which was obviously the inspiration for me doing a whole group of 146 when I got home. Because a lot of times, how does things get made at Britain's? I'll be blunt, you know, now that I'm sort of the grand poobah, I'll be someplace, I'll go, that's cool, we need to make that. And we go home and we make it. Most of it comes from the collectors. You know, you guys say, I want this or I want that, or I look back and go, well, we started this range and we stopped for 3 years and we never did this figure, this figure, this figure, we go back and infill. But a lot of times it's just like, you know, Eric and I were standing on Hadrian's Wall last year in England, and how can you not think, how cool would it be to do like, you know, end of 1st or early 2nd century Romans on the wall? That's all I'm going to say. So anyway, 146 figures are going to kind of cruise through here. These are old news, but these are raw sculpts for my bench. And that's kind of taking the whole group and putting on a little round top display we made. Original photography is such an asset, and it can also be just infuriating because sometimes you'll see a photograph, you only see one side, what's going on behind, you know, how is her apron tied? I don't know. I'll never know. So we have to guess. But I love photography for inspiration for figures. And we did these 2 figures greeting French civilians. They're from U.S. Army Civil Corps photographs. We used a reenactor to inspire this one. I was able to get photographs of the back of him, and these figures will be available this fall. And that's in front of our little French houses that we offer from Hudson Allen Studio. Vietnam War, that's the war I didn't have to go fight. I'm really glad. I have a little story to share, which is uniquely American. You know, I grew up when everyone's brothers were going overseas, and the brothers that preceded them were part of the occupation army in Europe or whatever, et cetera, et cetera. And all the uncles and dads and neighbors were World War II vets, and my other uncles on my grandmother's side were World War I vets. So we all just assumed in the United States you're going to go in the Army. And I didn't have to go, but I have a mortal fear of sharks. Why is this relevant? Because when I was about 11, 12 years old, there used to be these great little history books sold to the Sears catalog, and I marked down some I want. My mom got me one on the War in the Pacific. There's a chapter on the USS Indianapolis. And I know what happens if you're in saltwater and there's hungry sharks. So I remember telling my friends, if I get a draft notice to report at the U.S. Navy recruiting office, I will get up extra early and go to the Marines. Or I'll go to the Army and I'll volunteer to pump an M60 machine gun to a rice paddy because I don't want to be eaten by sharks. And thank God I never had to do that. So anyway, color photography and being able to talk to vets is really going to impact what we do. I actually had active duty current Marines wear Vietnam Creed uniforms and pose for me. So I've got the RTO, radio telephone operator with all this proper smokes, the right KRC-25 radio, the whole 9 yards. We've got about 17 figures for this range we'll do for Way City. And I showed them to guys that were there and went, wow, that's the way it looked. Another story I'll share real quickly. Remember that very first workbench picture that showed a guy with the BAR and a parka with his hood up? That was a U.S. Marine at the Chosin Reservoir in Korea. And that was, I had the same folks at the U.S. Marine Historical Company dress up current Marines in Korea clothing. But we got an interesting letter 5, maybe 6 years ago, and Eric opens it up, and it's from a vet who had been at Chosin Reservoir. And his niece had bought him a granddaughter had bought him a figure. He said, and the letter goes, I would have never bought anything like this at all for myself. And I opened up, I was surprised to get it. I took the figure out, and I looked at those boots, and I went, oh my God, I hated those boots. My feet sweat so much, and I remembered those boots. And then I looked at the ground sheet on the back, and I could actually hear it fluttering frozen above my foxhole. And so basically he's writing all these memories that flashed back, and he's an older man now, but it was sort of like whatever memories it brought back, it made him write us a letter that we got it right, and it brought the memories back. And in some ways, I'd like to think even figures that we make that represent some people from another time, if they can see it, they might go, oh, yeah, that's real similar to what I look like. So anyway, Vietnam Marines with their M14s. Here's my Marines actually posing in period clothing. This fellow runs Tom Williams, the U.S. Marine Historical Company, and he was trained to put out fires for aircraft for the air arm of the Marines at the end of the Vietnam War, and all of a sudden they said, Gunny, you're going to Vietnam, you're going to be a door gunner. We're evacuating everybody. So he was one of the last guys out, and he said, I never thought I'd have to go. The war was winding down in a bad way, but Tom has been just a wonderful asset. There's Tom again, set up with the Korean War kit, and you can see the figures that we sculpted inspired by the photos they sent us. And this is a Michigan State policeman now, a young man that does an impeccable Civil War impression, and we've had him out to pose for figures. And again, photography is a wonderful thing. Rick Simmons, good friend of mine, longtime friend, that is his 10th Royal Veteran Battalion uniform. So the British Army realized the garrison force in the Canadas was hard duty, and there were lots of men that were broken from service. They actually created a regiment of senior fellows that were used up and broken for hard service. And their job was to garrison the various outposts in Canada, in mostly Upper Canada. Well, war breaks out, And these guys that think they're just going to sit around in their outposts are now mobilized to go out in hard campaigning. So Rick made an impeccably hand-sewn uniform. I like to point this out because this knapsack is the classic British Army Napoleonic knapsack, which no one knew what it looked like. The only records we had was paintings by Dennis Dighton of the foot guards in front of Hougoumont, and they're a different looking contraption. We know in the 1820s, post-Napoleonic Wars, there's a wooden frame in them. So the trotter pack is what everybody thinks is this wooden frame, rigid pack, and this is where reenactors are kind of interesting in interfacing with museum people. Some years ago, at a reenactment in Waterloo, Belgium, there's a German reenactor, a Swedish reenactor, and a British reenactor kind of kibitzing, and they're kind of comparing notes. And one of the British reenactors goes, "It's too bad that all the patterns for the British knapsacks burned up in the 1830s Tower Arsenal fire. We'll never know what they look like." He goes, "Well, we have one in our museum in Sweden." "What do you mean you have one?" "Well, we have one, I'm sure of it. I'll go back and look into it, but I'm pretty sure we have one." Well, they have this mint example of a foot guards pack with the cartouche in the back. It had like 4 or 5 button boards for polishing your buttons inside. And what happened is apparently thousands of sets of equipment and arms were surplus to Sweden to keep them on their side during the Napoleonic Wars, and they kept a set of everything. So we now know what at least the foot guard pack looked like, and that's what Rick used with all the measurements to create his 10th Royal Veteran Battalion pack. And there's a figure which you'll see this fall. There's Rick again, looks just like him, in his 10th Royal Veteran Battalion pack.
I'm trying.
Okay. Oh, technology God, please don't frown upon us now. So if it ends here, I guess it's okay. So, are there any questions?
Are you going to do King Charles at some point?
Yes, we are. Well, look at that. We did a Charles the First.
Yes.
And again, we did Charles the First. I feel obliged to do Charles the Second.
Yeah.
And I feel really obliged to do Charles the Third. I hate his new portrait. What was he thinking? Hopefully he will have a long reign and he'll have another really nice portrait done. Graham Scollett, my former Royal Marine Drum Major. So we know at some point he's going to ascend to the throne, right? I said, "What do you think he's going to wear?" And he goes, he'll be king. He can wear whatever he wants. And I went, good point. So as a result, we didn't sculpt the figure because I didn't know what he's going to wear. Now I've got some photographs of him. Next time he does Trooping in the Colors, whatever he's wearing, that's all sculpted.
So that's today.
Yeah. I've got a head sculpt of him that looks like he's going to speak to you about, rare flowers. It's that good. So we're just waiting to put him in a body. So I do photography. I've got this youngster who's now all 21 years old, and I've got all original World War II GI stuff, and he's so small and so skinny, I have to put suspenders on everything, otherwise the pants end up around his ankles. But that's classic of what a GI would have really looked like in World War II. So Adam, and I laugh because most of the time I put Adam in full winter clothing and it's 95 degrees out, and he's a good sport. So I try to bring him in for modeling sessions when it's cooler, and I brought these guys in. Here's my Michigan State policeman and his brother, who's a helicopter engine repair pilot. I decided I'm going to dress them up in winter clothing. I'm going to have them come out in the winter. So I staged them for some 101st Airborne guys in Ardennes. So we'll just kind of fly through this. You guys know these. I'm doing much more French Canadian Wars. The upcoming season, you'll see some of that.
I'm trying.
I really like the way this figure came out, and this is actually the paint master before he put the polished stainless steel blade on. All of our figures that have swords now have polished stainless steel, and if it's a Napoleonic or late 18th century sword, there's bluing and gilding on it. We use a decal to replicate that. If you take a look at some of the figures over here, you'll see it. Thomas Jackson, Civil War, still a pretty strong seller as far as all of our ranges. Civil War artillery, I have been firing black powder artillery since I was 19 years old, so I have a soft spot for artillery. Civilian subject matters, we're going to do more and more of that. Women, we find now in all militaries, are highly represented, and we need to address that. I love this uniform. This is a U.S. Navy uniform from 1913 to 1941. Famously known to most of us in the movie The Sand Pebbles, Steve McQueen wearing it. Medics, we find anything that we do that is medical related sells for any period very well. I really like that figure. 101st Airborne, since Band of Brothers, worldwide, everybody wants airborne. Although 506 is something we do a lot of, I like lighter infantry. I can't imagine just getting aboard of the lighter and loading up with another 10 or 12 guys full of equipment and say, okay, no engine, we're going to cut you loose, crash to earth. So I kind of like 20th century conflict things. I'm familiar with it. This is actually going to be one of the giveaways over here for those that sign up for the club. At the end of the show, we're going to give a half track and 3 GIs to someone that signs up for the club. If only one signs up, one gets it. If 4 or 5 do, you've got a 1 to 5 chance. So keep that in mind. World War II armor. Most of our armor we're actually designing digitally. I talked about that earlier because it's a hard thing that we can actually go out and research. M18 Hellcat. Every vehicle you see that we've done, we've gone out and looked at real examples with tape measures and taking yardsticks and photographing and measuring. The M5 3-inch anti-tank gun. Every cemetery and VFW hall in the United States has got one of these parked in front, so I was obliged to do them. That's obviously from Bomber Command, a British bomber pilot. And then with the Mighty 8th, which became Masters of the Air, coming out, I was compelled to do U.S. Army Air Corps. Again, it was a weird thing for me growing up. When I grew up in Detroit, when I look back, I'm stunned how many former Army Air Corps members there were in our community. And it never occurred to me until I was much older that the auto industry attracted these guys because they were trained technical trades in the military that were useful for the auto industry. So the fellow behind me was a master mechanic on 4-engine bombers. The fellow that lived behind him was a co-pilot that survived 2 crash landings in a B-17. The guy across the street was a navigator that sold EKG machines professionally. My best friend's stepfather was a ball turret gunner at B-24 that survived a crash landing in the ball turret. The only man that survived, the rest of the crew died. Another story for another day. So the Army Air Corps stuff is kind of fascinating to me on a personal connection. My uncle was in the Army Air Corps. My Uncle Gene, never married after the war. And this is just a suggestion of how some people might be able to bring a small collection to their household to use that for an ad. That's actually a 1790s table of Ericas and a 19th century bottle and some soldiers set up on the spines of books. But it's kind of a nice way to show our product. So anyway, thank you for being here. If you have any other questions, you can talk to me now or corner me later.
Well, 25 years ago, I saw